Hello, my name is Dario Clay, and this is my Homeland Security Policy Critique on implementing better collaborative police efforts and preventative planning for counterterrorism. Research topic and thesis. Ask yourself this question. Has international terrorism changed the way the U.S. identifies terrorist threats on American soil? Through collecting data on the effects of terrorism happening all over the world, you can evaluate how the U.S. uses this data to protect itself. Why did I select this topic? I selected this topic because of the effects that terrorism has had on communities and families, including mine. This is the reason why I pursued a military/civilian career in emergency management. Being able to help implement preventative plans at the local, state, and federal level have given me a great sense of purpose. The purpose of counterterrorism is very important to protecting and deterring acts of terrorism. I have hands-on experience with counterterrorism as well as collaborating with units to identify potential terrorist threats. Key findings. What is terrorism? Terrorism is commonly referred to as acts of violence that target civilians in the pursuit of political and ideological aims. What are human rights? Human rights are universal values and legal guarantees that protect individuals and groups against actions and omissions, primarily by state agents that interfere with fundamental freedoms, entitlements, and human dignity. What is international human rights? International human rights are laws that reflect a number of core international human rights treaties and customary laws. The local, state, and federal government have made efforts to prevent and deter terrorism through collaborative efforts as well as communication. The three issues with the three key findings. The first issue with counterterrorism is defining what is considered terrorism. There is no universal definition of terrorism, which leaves room for interpretation in many cases. Many governments have identified what they consider a terrorist act might be, but this does not apply across the board for every government or agency. The second issue with counterterrorism is the extent that counterterrorism activities detain in the criminal justice process. The principle of rule of law, human rights imply that they can offer a peaceful, accountable, and legitimate response to terrorism without violation of human rights. The third issue with counterterrorism is that racially and ethnically motivated extremists and networks with racial, ethnic, or religious hatred motivation toward violence to perform violent actions. These three factors are concerning, especially if they do not have long-term government bodies to oversee or counter terrorism objectives domestically. This slide gives a visual representation of how counterterrorism agencies have spread their roles and responsibilities across the United States. This is the result of interagency collaboration efforts. This slide displays the international terrorism deaths. The surge in terrorism has continued to increase worldwide, reaching 35,000 deaths. Since 2001, terrorism deaths have been on the rise and continue to rise due to shifting targets and tactics, state sponsorship and terrorism, ad hoc organizations, increasingly sophisticated weapons, and new motives. This slide I will discuss the three strategic goals. Strategic goal number 1. Enhance domestic terrorism related to research and analysis. Strategic goal number 2. Improve information sharing across all levels within and without the federal government. Strategic goal number 3. Illuminate transnational aspects of domestic terrorism. In this slide, I will discuss terrorist funding. Combating terrorist financing, CFT, is considered a highly complex process that involves a multitude of personnel. This process is responsible for helping state with a wide variety of responses ranging from legislation, international policy, operational level, and response. In this slide, I will discuss strategic goal takeaways. The type of terrorist threats domestically have become less one-dimensional than the bomb attacks we were originally used to identify terrorism threats. This has dropped to 25%. The use of vehicles to transport bombs has risen to 27%. The use of firearms have become more commonly used in terrorist attacks, rising to 24%, while melees and other forms of terrorist attacks are at 12% each.